Hi everyone, so today I'm going to teach you the basics of Element 3D. This is really made for Instagram editors who are starting out with Element 3D, so I'll just be teaching you like the most basic controls that you should know. First of all, keep in mind that Element 3D is a plugin, so I will link in the description like how I downloaded mine and stuff like that. So how are we going to use the plugin? First, we're going to go to Layer, New, Solid, and just create a solid layer. This is where you'll apply the plugin. So now just go to Effects and Presets and just type in Element and drag that onto your solid layer, and this will all pop up. So it may seem overwhelming at first, there is a lot of controls, but once again, I'm only going to teach you what you really need to know for your Instagram edits. So let's start with the scene setup. This is where you're going to see like all of your shapes and everything. This is where you can create your cubes, stuff like that. All of the making 3D stuff is going to happen here. So let's close this for now. So custom text and mask, here you can link like a mask that you made and then extrude that, make it 3D, and I will explain that more later on. So for example, here I have this mask of Namjoon. I'm just gonna go back to my Element 3D layer where it says path layer 1. I'm gonna click this and then like link it to the layer with the mask, and I will explain more on like how this works later on. Next is the custom texture map. So these are like the images slash backgrounds that you can apply to your shapes. So for example, if I wanted to make a cube out of this picture, I would link that layer to it. Also, since we're going to be using this picture to make him 3D, I'm also going to link that picture over here. So those are the main things that you need to know in this little panel for right now. Now let's go to the actual scene setup and let's make some shapes. So let's start over here where it says import. This is basically where if you download models like from CG Trader or TurboSquid, you can import those models. For example, here I have a folder of the models that I've created, so I'm just going to double click on one of them, and there you go. Automatically it's just all there for you to use. We're just gonna skip the environment tab for now, but let's move on to the extrude. So I'm gonna double click this, and you can see it used the mask that I made, and it used that to create a sort of shape of him, if that makes sense. So let's go over the controls for the extrusion models. There is a lot of controls here, and I know it looks overwhelming, but I promise you, you'll only need to know like less than half of these. So first, right here at the top where it says extrusion and custom path, this is where you can change like which mask you want to use. Obviously, we only linked one mask, so if I go to custom path 2, nothing's gonna be there. But let's say I close out of element for now, and I'm just gonna create some random mask here, and I'm going to link it to my custom text and mask. Now if we go back to the scene setup, if I click custom path 2, you can see that now it's the mask that I just made. Now if you click this little arrow here, it should say something like this. So this is where you can change the appearance of your shape. If you're just using like one of these shapes here, this is where you would like apply the picture that you want to use. For example, if I made a cube, this is where I would apply the picture. But since the extrusion model is a little different, it has 2 extra tabs here, but we only really need to focus on this first tab. So the main values that you want to play around with is first the extrude. If you increase this, obviously it is making it thicker. The bevel size, I'm going to zoom in here and going to increase the bevel size, and you can see it's kind of making it curvier, kind of softer. Next, we want to go to this little image here, so just click that. So if you look at diffuse and then none set, click this little arrow. And then here you can see the two layers that we linked for the custom texture map. So like I said, these are the pictures that you can use for your shape. So if I click this, you can see it used this picture onto the shape. But obviously we want to use this picture since that's what we're making 3D right now. So just click OK. Most of the times it's going to be weird like this, so if it looks like this for you, just click back to the extrusion model and then click these little squares. And then where it says texture mapping, just click this and press UV. So going back to the bevel, where once again we can change how this image looks. Everything after this picture, everything below this is just basically like the lighting, reflection, stuff like that. So you can just kind of play around with these amounts. Diffuse basically means if it's white, like it'll make it brighter, make it darker. I can change the color to red, and it's, you know, you see the difference. Down here is the reflectivity, so obviously if you increase it, it's gonna look like that. Refraction, I honestly don't even know how to explain. This is just another one of those lighting things. So yeah, that's all you really need to know to make your person 3D. Obviously it's not like realistic 3D, but you know, once again, Instagram editors doesn't need to be all professional. Moving on from the extrude tab is create. And here you can see these shapes that Element 3D allows you to work with. Obviously this is going to be a bit hard to work with if the extrusion model is just there. So I'm just gonna go over here and then click this blue square, and then it'll make him disappear. It's not gonna delete it, it's just gonna make him disappear for now. So if you look back at the create tab, there is only a few shapes that we can use. However, there's a few settings that we can use to make these into new shapes. So for example, if I go down here where it says chamfer, I don't know, if I increase it, it's gonna make it more round. And then if I go down here to chamfer settings, if I decrease it, it makes it sharper, and if I increase it, it makes it like curvier and rounder. Over here we have the size XYZ, so X, that is horizontal, Y is vertical, and then Z is like the thickness of it. So you can play around with those settings to make a new shape. And then if we click these arrows, I actually forgot to talk about it with the extrusion model, but these arrows is basically where you can change the size of it and obviously the position of it. Pretty straightforward. I mean, these are just really your basic controls. So orientation is rotation, and yeah, that's all you really need to know. So like I said, I actually forgot to talk about this for the extrusion model, but it's the exact same thing. So if I put this back, just increase him, change the position, same thing. So now let's change the appearance of this cube. So once again, just click on this little arrow, and then here is where you can change the appearance of it. So if you compare this to like what we did earlier, it's the exact same thing except for these two tabs, because these are changing the shape of the extrusion. Obviously this is not an extrusion, so it doesn't have that. All it has is like where you can place the image as well as where you can change the lighting. So once again, to change the image, just go to this little picture here, diffuse, and then just click this, click the arrow, and then just click on the picture that you want to use. Obviously my picture looks pretty fine, but once again, if it looks weird, just go back to the model, click these squares, and then make sure it's at UV. So now that we're done changing the appearance of our shapes, I'm just going to enable the extrusion model again so we can see both of them, and I'm just gonna move this to the side. So now I'm just gonna go over a few more basic controls before we close off this scene setup. So this environment here is basically what is being reflected on your pictures. So here, if I go back to the cube, I'm just going to increase the reflection so you can see what I'm talking about. So if I go to presets and then environment, and then just go to either of these folders, I can double click one of these pictures, and you can see it changed how the pictures look. So if I click this one, obviously that made them a little more orangey, brownish. If I click this one, it's going to make them a little more blue, and you can see here, you can clearly see how the reflection is being changed. Now if we click on the environment tab, here we can change like how bright it is, just how saturated it is, stuff like that. I don't usually play around with those values, but it's good to know if you think your thing is too dark. Next is the group. So if we click this little folder, obviously it's going to create a folder, and then I can just click this and drag it into the folder. If you want to add multiple things at once to a folder, you can just click this, and then I'm going to press shift, and then it should select both of them, and now I can drag both of them into the folder. So what can we do with this group folder? If I drag this box into the folder, and then I'm just going to make a duplicate of it so I can show you what it does with multiple objects in the folder. So if I click here, and then the transform thing, if I increase the scale, it increases both of them. It's basically like a null layer in Element 3D. Another thing that you could do with this is separate your objects. So if I drag this above here, and then I click this to group 2, this will allow us to add movement to this cube without it affecting the extrusion model. So that's all that we really need to talk about for the scene setup. So I'm just going to press OK to save this. Now if we look back at our panel here, go to World Transform, and this is basically where you can, change the position, change the size and stuff like that. However, it's best to use a world transform null layer, because if you were to keyframe the position here, you wouldn't be able to change the graphs of either of them. And I'm just going to delete those and then create world transform. Now we can click P for position and then like right click on this, separate dimensions, and now if I change the X position and if I easy ease these keyframes, I can actually add a graph to it now. And these just have the same controls as you would with a regular null layer. So if we rotate this, obviously it's going to rotate everything. But what if you want to rotate them in different directions? And here where it says like group 1 to group 5, just click on this little arrow and then create group null and then create. So now we have this null layer that if I rotate it, it's only going to rotate the objects that are in group 1, which is the extrusion model. Back to my element 3D layer, go back to group 2, which is the cube. If I create a null for that, I can also just rotate this without affecting the other 3D shape. So that is actually all that you really need to know to use Element 3D in your edits. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow for more tutorials. Make sure to follow my Instagram at VirgoUnes, link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.